Water. Hmm? You drink it yet?
No.
Okay. Do you mind if I drink both of them?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy AGM day. I think we declared an Irish church national holiday. Just make it a whole nice event. We'll play games, we'll be friends, and then we'll battle it out for an hour and a half. Maybe play games again, and after try to become friends again. But no, joking aside, I did want to talk about the Providence today. What is the Providence? And I think it's something that actually I wanted to share because it's from a conversation I had with an old friend this past week. And it's always nice to catch up with friends because he's kind of in a similar life stage as me. He was a pastor actually for a couple years of a church in the States. He's got 3 kids, basically the same age, right? He's going through some difficult parts of life and trying to come out the other end of it. So it was a very nice conversation just to kind of sit down and kind of share a bit. And life is, the world's kind of too big in a way. We're all busy. Sometimes we can only talk to each other once every 2 or 3 years. But it's still, I'm always grateful for the opportunity. I find it very comforting and also kind of educational. So I just wanted to share something that came up in this conversation that got me really thinking and really reflecting. And I think it's very relevant actually for us and our community and the kind of phase we're going through, right? As we're kind of maturing and growing. Hopefully we're always maturing and growing, right? On an individual level, but also as a group of brothers and sisters that are maturing and growing together. So what I thought was interesting is we were talking specifically around his time as the pastor of a church community. It probably would have been relatively large in the US, maybe 3 or 4 times bigger than our one, maybe even bigger, but I didn't ask for numbers. But he explained that what he did when he took over is he just kind of changed everything, right? He is like, I just wanted to do almost like the opposite of what we've always been doing, right? So it's like, I really wanted to shift the culture, and I really wanted to be like, just completely focus everything on kind of family and community and kind of build everything around that. And he was explaining that they had done a survey towards the end, like a before and after, what do you like better, right? Kind of thing. And something he was very proud of is that the under 40s, it was 80, it might have even been 90% preferred the new way and didn't want to go back to the old way, right? They preferred the new way to the old way. But also what he felt was quite a victory is even the people over 40, only 25% didn't wanted to go back or preferred the old way, felt the new way was like maybe too revolutionary or too horizontal or whatever the complaint was, right? And it was kind of a split, like, and 25% will support you no matter what. I joked the ride or die, the always support you, right? And then it was kind of 25% didn't mind, and then 25% were happy with it, right? So it's still quite but it was quite different from, he said, he was trying to change the church culture around that. He felt create a lot of divisions between the older generation and the younger generation. And we were talking about, and he said this sentence, this phrase, and this is kind of what got me thinking and really reflecting, is he said if he could sum up the difference in culture or the challenge that the second gen faced in the community and being part of the movement. He felt he could sum it up in one sentence, right? Now I'm always very skeptical of one sentence summaries on complex issues. There's always more. There's always things missing. But it does help kind of focus your thinking, right? So he said, and because he gave this presentation to the other leaders, right? He was trying to kind of explain what he's doing, and he gave this report up. And he said the thing he feels is almost kind of painful for the second gen when they grow up in the church and the church culture is the feeling they get, or the message that gets handed down, that the providence is more important than you, right? And that's how he kind of summed it up. And it's kind of a very powerful way to phrase it, right? The kind of struggle or the frustration that many people feel. But what I thought was very interesting was my reaction when he said that, which is, yeah, of course the providence is more important than me, right? So I felt like, but I felt like that wasn't a good reaction. So I was also reflecting on why is that so easy for me to accept? Because I could really understand his point, right? It's very difficult to feel like your parents or your partner, but especially parents in this situation, that you're like a second priority for them, right? And so I was asking myself, like, did I ever feel that? Did I ever experience that? And I realized that it wasn't when I look back on kind of how I was raised and my relationship with my parents, I never actually felt that I was competing with the providence, right? And I realized I wasn't in the same position or had the same kind of, I don't want to say resentment, but that kind of like feeling that I was left behind or that I was in second place, right, to what my parents really cared about, because I always felt part of the providence. And so I realized, like, when people think of providence, they think of many different things. It doesn't have a clear definition, it's kind of this vague thing. But the feeling I think that he was expressing, which I think is very true, is feeling like, you're not the priority, that your parents care about something else more than you, or that, it puts down your own value, right? And I realized when I was growing up, though, I always felt like I was included in the providence, right? And I think that maybe it was just the way my parents explained things. Or I remember, my dad wasn't a full-time missionary. We were always kind of together as a family. So it's a very different context. And then also, when he did get called for mission work, there were I remember growing up, there were two 40-day conditions that there was a call for missionary. So my mom went to Russia, my dad went to Turkey, 40 days. But I remember my parents like sitting down and explaining to me that they were going and why it was a good thing. And it might be a little tough at home for a while, or we might have to shift things or get a babysitter or whatever. But it was kind of like it was explained to me. I was part of the decision almost, even obviously I wasn't, but I was included in what was going on, right? And the big one was moving to Ireland and becoming national messiahs, right? We just packed up all our stuff in suitcases and drove and took a plane and took a train and a bus and a ferry and just kind of landed in Cork they had to find a place to live, right? But in a way, it was kind of like at that age an adventure. And we were doing it together as a family, right? So again, it was for the providence. It was like a sacrifice in a way, but it was something we did together as a family, right? So again, I felt part of it, right? So I realized I never really felt like I was competing with the providence, right? For my parents' love. And so in that context, I realized, yeah, it can easily cause resentment if that's how you feel, right? You shouldn't be competing with You shouldn't be competing for the providence. We should be part of the providence, right? So, um, and it's kind of a common. I realize it's kind of a common discussion anyway. Like since I've gotten blessed, right? It's always that kind of issue that comes up when people are discussing, what's the purpose of the blessing? Should we focus on building an ideal couple and family, and just really make sure that that we're the best example of like a loving, happy family? Or should we be devoting ourselves to mission and to the providence, right? I remember at teenage second gen, that's what we were kind of debating, almost as if it was two different choices, right? um and I had this conversation quite deeply with my own brother, right? Kind of back and forth. And again, it's always, I think, an element of our church culture that we struggle with, that we have to kind of address or talk about. Mhm. And the reason for that is very clear, because that's what was kind of happening in history, right? In our church history, we had parents making incredible sacrifices, right? Um, when I was 2 and my sister was 1, my parents left us for a year, just in a nursery, right? And I was kind of the last generation of second gen to have to experience that. So I don't remember it. My parents picked me up a year later. I was 3. I spoke fluent Japanese, but I recovered, right? Although I lost the Japanese, unfortunately, right? but but for my older second gen brothers and sisters, some of them were in that situation till they were 8, right? 9, right? Their whole childhood was not having parents around and being raised in like a nursery, right? So, and a lot of them became very resentful for that. It really disconnected them from their parents. So the question is, was that the wrong thing to do? Was it the right thing to do, but just at the time, right? Should we do that again? Like, if is that the providence? Is that what makes the providence work, right? So because the older culture, because they experienced these things, and their motivation was to do God's will and to live according to the providence, um, then was that just a one-off, or is that the motivation we still need, right? And it's also very relevant to kind of the matching and blessing, right? Because what was our heart and attitude in the matching and blessing before? It was 100%, I'll accept anyone. Father stands me up in a room of random people and points to a random person, and that's who I'm going to live with the rest of my life, right? Was that the best way to do it? Was that the providence and God's will, or was that like a temporary measure until we could sort ourselves out? And then what should our heart be when we're getting matched now and blessed now, right? Now, is it changed? Can we be more um, horizontal? Can we be more picky? Can we be more selfish? Or is it even selfish? Is it just more practical, right? Is it the way we should do it now? I ask all these questions because I'm not going to give you guys an answer. I'm saying I'm saying that this is kind of the culture that we're in, because the culture is changing and it's evolving, and we're trying to understand our value in the providence, right? We're trying to understand who we are, and how does that relate to what our parents had to do, and what our parents sacrificed, and what our parents invested. And I think it's quite an important thing to always be reflecting on and praying about and thinking about, because things do change. And actually, I think the key point, and this is my own understanding of the providence, things get better, right? The point of the providence, or the meaning of the providence, is that we're moving in a direction, right? We're going towards an ideal. And the things we do, and the things we're asked to do, and the things we try to do are to move us forward, right? And so So yes, people will make mistakes, or people will misinterpret, or people will, everyone's going to do their best with the limited capabilities they have and the situation they have. But I think in terms of us as being part of this providence, it's important that we always feel that we're part of the providence, right? And uh, that was kind of my conclusion when it is wrong, I think, to feel that the providence is more important than you, right? In other words, I feel my initial reaction was because I am very much part of the old culture, right? I very much grew up in the traditional church culture. I went to Korea. I liked the authoritarian regime, let's say, but I mean, and I can say that that's a very Western way to say, vertical alignment, right? So there's still balancing that has to be done, and I still struggle with this balance, right? I want to welcome everyone and be inclusive of everyone and love everyone, right? And be very horizontal and just hang out and play board games all day, um, because I love board games and I usually win, and so it's fun for me. But obviously, there are ideals and standards that actually matter so much, because after the board games and after the fun, there are things that have to get done, and some, there are problems that have to be solved, and we need strength of character and heart that have to be built, right? um, and the default kind of attitude, or the default reaction to danger or pain, is to run away or to block it out, right? And that's natural, so we almost have to be unnatural in how we solve these problems. um, so so again, the providence is, in many ways, we are the providence, and that's kind of the conclusion I want to come to. It when we think about the providence, when we look at the way the providence has been run in the past, it's good. I think it's healthy to think that those things were done for us, right? Maybe it hurt us, maybe it was difficult, but we were a part of it, right? I know it was very difficult for my parents to leave me for a year. And even now, when my kids were 2, especially Zach, I was thinking about that whole year. I was like, this whole year, everything I'm experienced with my son, my dad didn't experience with me, because I was off in Colorado, and he was running a restaurant for the church, right? So um, but I think the motivation in the heart was always, for the children. And I think that sometimes gets lost in translation, or gets lost in the pain, or just gets lost in the experience. But, it's wherever we are in the providence, we're part of it, right? And actually, it's one of the most beautiful parts for me of the principle is the absolute value of every person, right? It's the providence actually will never succeed. We'll never get to the ideal if everyone's not there, right? And there's this great analogy in the principle. It says, imagine a machine, right? But every single part of that machine is unique, right? And you can't replace it and you can't fix it. Then every part, not just the machine as a whole, but every individual part, every like little screw and nut and bolt, is as valuable as the whole machine, right? Um, so it's the culture is always changing, right? Because we're always adapting. Society changes, we adapt to it until we have an ideal culture. And I think even an ideal culture itself would always be changing. But I think we have to be aware of how we evolve as a culture. Like, we have to try new things, change things, right? So for this year, I really want to be open to kind of try anything, right? If it helps move us closer to God, if it helps move us closer to each other so that we get closer to God, I think it's worth an effort, right? And I know part of the reason we kind of stick to formats is they're comfortable and they're already organized, and there's less work we have to do. But I really hope we can try some interesting things this year, some new things this year, because actually I think that's what even Mother is pushing for, right? If you think of this event in Korea, that's kind of the Providence, right? Mother's calling everyone to Korea, as many people that can come, and we're going to have this big event and this grand opening of the Cheonwon-gung and the Heavenly Sanctum, and it'll be like a new phase of Cheonpyeong and a new phase of our movement. But we can do that on our local level, right? We can do something we can prepare something for the future, right? So I really, after speaking to this friend, after thinking about this point, I really pray that nobody feels like they're competing with God's providence, right? Or that they're less than God's providence, or they feel undervalued because people have put the providence over them, right? I really hope that as a community, we really are all part of God's providence and we get that balance right. And we won't always get it right, but I think that really has to be how we move forward, right? How we treat each other, how we treat our culture, because culture it's kind of another word like providence, right? It can mean a lot of things. Everyone has a different version or interpretation of it, but ultimately, I think it's really how we treat each other, how we interact with each other, and also how we interact with new people, right? Because I'm not just talking about our members are part of the providence, right? Everybody is part of the providence, right? And if there's a couple people I just can't stand being around, well, that's going to slow down the providence because I'll have to be around them at the end, right? So it's yeah, it's in conclusion, I just found it very fascinating that I didn't like my own reaction to my friend's comment, just because it didn't apply to me in the way I perceive things. But actually, the more I thought about it, it really does. It is very relevant and it does apply, right? That, I think people, it'll always come down to our understanding of our value, right? If we see ourselves valued less, it'll always hurt and we'll be resentful and it'll hold us back. And we need to figure out how we value each other and value ourselves. Really the way that God does, right? This way the principle describes is equal in value to the whole machine, to the whole universe, right? Not equal in value to each other. So it's not like there's 10 kajillion universe points and we're all like 0.0003 universe points, but that we're all 10 kajillion universe points. And that's really hard. That's really hard to like even believe in ourselves that much or have that confidence. And that I think that the real understanding of that only comes when we actually can connect to God and really feel God's love, right? But until then, we can at least see ourselves as, 1 or 2 kajillion or something, right? But have that confidence that we are part of God's providence. We are God's providence, right? So those were my thoughts and reflections today. And I don't know if my friend will ever see this, but a special thanks to him for catching up with me, sharing his thoughts, inspiring this service for today, this sharing. And on that note, please join me in a prayer. 사랑 많으신 우리 하늘 부모님, our beloved Heavenly Parent, we're always so grateful that we have our lives, that we have this opportunity to stand here and to share, to come together and enjoy a nice meal together, to have a community where we can find value and direction and support. And I really pray that every person is finding those things in our community. And if they're not, I really pray we can step up and improve and be able to really be people that offer genuine love and support and care for each person around us, especially the ones we see the most, that we see regularly, who really have become a part of our extended family. Also, today, at the same time as this service, Shin Chul Nim and his wife are giving a testimony and a talk over in the UK. And today, Mother will be in Vegas to speak to the members there, and we can share in that experience due to the time difference. So I just pray that even though we're oftentimes very far apart, we can only see each other every now and then. Really, we are a global community. We're trying to build a feeling of global connection and really be able to absorb and welcome any situation and any person into that feeling of love and connection. And to do that, we also know that we have to be able to overcome our own demons and challenges inside of us, that we have to be able to raise up ourselves and have faith and confidence in ourselves as children of you, our Heavenly Parent. And as True Father once expressed it, absorb and digest all the problems of the world through true love. So we just pray that each day can be a journey in that direction, that we don't lose faith or get discouraged, but lean on each other for hope and direction and inspiration. And I'm just so grateful for each person here and each person in my life who has been able to help me get to this point. And on behalf of brothers and sisters here today, and in my name, Young Il Eli Loew, Blessed Central Family. Aju. Aju. All right. Thank you, everyone. I welcome